Hi guys, how's it going? Idris here. Happy New Year to you. I'm really excited again to have an opportunity to walk through a data visualization report together. This time we'll be taking a look at again a Maven challenge. Definitely not pizza this time, but the space challenge. Let me just take you through what the challenge is all about, where you can find the link to the dataset, everything that you need to know, and then we can get started. So on the Maven side, you would find this description about the challenge, the Maven Space Challenge. It was actually released after James Webb released some amazing images of our universe late last year, and then we can see that as usual we would find this data set in the data playground. We'll be going there shortly, and of course we can use any visualization tool for this analysis, but of course I will be doing mine here on Power BI. I'll be recreating my entry. So this data set has about 4,631 records. We'll be taking a deep dive into that also, although you can't submit for the prize anymore because the challenge is over. But yeah, I encourage you, especially if you're a newbie, to like create this, and then you can share, tag the Maven community, get some comments, you get corrections. That's what the data community is all about, helping one another. If you're not familiar with the Maven challenge, I encourage you to check on LinkedIn. You would find a lot more about them. And of course, in the previous series that we had, we looked at one of the challenge hosted by Maven Analytics. So I'll just go over to the data set, and you can of course find that in the data playground, still on Maven side. So all you need to do is come to resources from Maven side. The link will be in the bio, and then you will go to the data playground where you can find a whole lot of data. I encourage anyone who is like getting started with analytics and you need data, you can definitely come to this playground. There are really a lot of data sets that you can really work on. One thing I like about it is the fact that many of them are not too dirty, right? So you have little or no data cleaning to do, just probably transformation and all of that. So the one we will be interested in today is the space missions, and that's what we're going to be working on. So once I just click on it, we can have a description about the dataset. So we can see that this space missions from 1957 to 2022, and of course we can see columns that we have, the details of the location, date, and so on. So recommended analysis, as always, we have how rockets are launched over time, the mission success rate, how it increased, which countries had successful mission, and so on and so forth. So you can preview the data, of course, but yeah, we just need to download. So I'm going to be downloading this. It's already on my computer. I would also just share the link in the description. So here is my entry for that challenge, and this is what to try to recreate. As always, I do my best to go from beginning to end, how I created this, the thought process, and why I do this is just to broaden our analytics mindset. It's not like the best way. There are still definitely better ways, but as far as for beginners, right, you can always get started with this. I believe there are definitely better reports than this. Of course, yeah, I was lucky to be among the finalists, but then I know for sure that they are really amazing. So that's also something I need to mention. You could like check out use the hashtag Maven Space Challenge on LinkedIn, and you would see amazing entries, where you can really get even more ideas about building a report in the future. So moving over to the data set after downloading, this is you have a zip file and then you can extract. So we have the data here in the space missions. I'm just going to open that, and then we have the space missions data dictionary. So dictionary is something that gives a definition about what you have in your data set. So let's just explore both of them. So first, let's start with the data dictionary. So we can see from the data dictionary that we have these fields. We have about 9 of them, and then we have the description of each field. So the company colon actually means that the company responsible for the space mission. The location means the location of the launch, and then the date is like the date of the launch, the time as well in UTC, we have the rocket, so the name of the rocket used for the launch, and then the name of the space missions, right? So then we have the rocket status, so this tells us whether the rocket is active or inactive, right? So as of August 2022, so this was like the last date that this data was actually obtained at the time. So we have price as well. We can see the cost of the rocket in million USD, and the status of the mission. So either the mission failed, it was successful, or it was a partial failure or pre-launch failure. So having known this, let's just go over to our data. So here is our data, just those columns that we saw. So we can see that I can just add a filter here with Control Shift L, or you can do that by going to data and then you can add filter. So we added it, so it's already there. So now with this filter I can just try to see what are like the cardinality of these columns, so that I can see the distinct and all of the distinct variables in there. So for this one, there's nothing really much from here, and then the location, we can see that the location is really a bit messy, and in my opinion I think we might need to work on this for sure. Then we have the date, which of course just date from 1957, of course the date with the full day, right? So, and then we have the time, and then we have the rocket name, mission, rocket status. Here we have just retired or active, and then we have the price. So we can see now that some rockets or some missions where the prices are not there, I mean even for majority of them. So these are just things we need to take note of even as we work on this particular project. And then we have the mission status, where we can see if it's successful or if it failed, and so on. So there are several things you could like do with this data. It depends on your audience, it depends on the style you want to go with. I decided to explore this data because then I remember I saw a couple of entries, and then I felt maybe it's just like it would just be me doing the same thing, right? So I just decided to like I read more, actually read a lot about space missions at the time, and this is something I learned from one of my mentors in the LinkedIn space, Mr. Gerard, and of course so many other people have said the same thing. So it's important you have like a domain of where that data is coming from, so you can really think like someone in that domain. So of course I don't work in the space field, so I just needed to do some simple research. I remember I did that for about 3 days, right? Just reading about space missions, and it was really interesting for me, right? So, and then that kind of like, I began to notice that, okay, 2021 was really an amazing year for space missions in history, and then I read that in 2022 as well, we've really seen quite a number of missions already, even at the time, which was around August, September. So this kind of like triggered, I said, okay, let me see from this data, will I be able to find that out also since this is like a real data set, right? And then will I be able to come up with some insights and draw some conclusions, or even predict what the outcome might be for the coming year. So this is just the background for this report. So when you are working on it, or if you have to work on any report, you don't have to be a static approach, right? So it does depend on a number of things that you've considered, right? So if another person actually handle this data, they would look at it differently, and that's why we have different submissions for the challenge, because people look at it from different angles. So the point is just relax whenever you come with across a data set, and try to look at what can you bring out from this. And it's worth noting that you don't necessarily need all the columns that are available in your data set, because for instance, this price, the moment I saw it, I knew I was not going to work with it, because more than half of it are not even there, right? So I don't really need to like bother myself about it, and and so on. So I would just go now straight up to what I did for my own entry, and it's not to say that's the only thing you can do. I'm just walking you through my own entry. Okay, So enough of the talking, let's get started. So we're here now in Power BI, and of course we will be doing some transformation along the line. We could actually do those transformation in our source, which is in this case Excel, but we are not going to be doing a lot, and we don't have a lot of data, right? So we can just go ahead to Power BI to do it straight up. So all I need to do is to get my data. Of course, you already downloaded the data, and then you can get data CSV, and then we have this data, right? This is the dictionary, and this is like the space missions, the data that we need. So I'm just going to click on that, and then I would wait. Okay, now we have like a preview of it, so I can just transform. Of course, we already did some of the steps in the pizza challenge, so I will not be doing a lot of talking on some things which I think we are already familiar with now. If you are not aware, we have a series like this. You can check it on the description, and also like on the YouTube page. So now we have the data looking like this. Nice. So I'm just going straight up to my work, what I did, so I would not be like trying to investigate something else. I'll just show you what I did, right? So first we have the company, we have the location, we have the date, time, and so on. So we could look at this column profile to see, the column profiling at the moment only works with 1000. So in order to change that, we'll come to the bottom left here and change it to entire data, right? So here we can see a description of all the records that we have. So we can see here that there are no no empty here. But when we get to a place like price, we can see that 73% are empty. This is a really good tool, column profile, that I use very often, and I also recommend you to do the same. And we can see for time we have 97%, and we have 3% empty. So these are just the things that you need to bear in mind. I remember before I started, or while I was doing my analysis, I wanted to like work on time, but then I just had to like change the way things were. I did a number of stuff, as I always mention. Before you finally come with that produce that you submit, you would definitely have explored a lot, right? So sometimes you feel, okay, this one does not make sense, this one does make sense to add, right? And then you can do what you need to do. So in my entry, you would notice that I didn't work with country at all. I didn't even do any analysis about country, so I wouldn't be working on this. But if you are interested in probably seeing the number of countries and their mission, then in this case you need to like extract the country. So you would notice that the country comes like as the last word after the last delimiter. So delimiter here is a comma. So if you check everything, you see comma USA, and so on. So in that case, you can just like take it out, and then should I show you? Okay, let me show you. We are not going to be using this, but I just want to show you how you can do this. So now, like I said, you'll notice that the country that you need is like after the last comma for everything. So you could just go to add column, and then you go to extract, and then you can go to text after delimiter, because we want the text after the comma, right? So after delimiter. So if I just had my comma without doing anything, don't forget that we have a couple of commas in each of them, right? So we have one here, we have another here. So it's definitely going to give me after the first one. So in order to like correct that, you go to advanced options, and then you would tell this guy, I don't want you to start from the front, I want you to start from the end, so that after the first delimiter, right, that it finds from this end, then give me that. So I'm going to change this from the start of the input to from the end of the input. So it's asking the number of delimiters to skip. I don't want him to skip anything, and then I do that. So now if you want to go from the front, you could actually go from the front if you are certain that the number of delimiters is uniform. So for instance, we have just two delimiters here, right? So there are probably some that we have more than one, like this one. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3. So it's you can't really start from the front. So if it was uniform, like we had just 2, I can tell it that okay, start from the beginning, but then skip 1, right? So if I tell you to skip 1, it will work for this, but it won't work for this, because here we have more than 2 delimiters. So I hope it makes sense. So let's just, the first option is definitely the better one, the better approach. So I just click on OK, and then you will see that this colon has been added here, so we can see our countries here. So let me just leave it. I'm not going to delete it. I'll just call it country, although it won't be used in our analysis, but yeah. So we have the country. So in my analysis, I realized I'm going to need year, right? So because, like I said, I wanted to explore how 2021 and 2022, if 2022 could do better than what we had, the exceptional number of missions we had in 2021. So definitely I need the year. So here, I can bring out the year from this date. So all I need to do, again, go to add colon and then date, and then I can take out the year from it, so we can have the year right there. Okay, so another thing that I did, even though it was towards the end of my analysis, that was when like the idea came, was to also check decades, right? So I wanted to, now we know the year. It's really a long time back, right? Since 1957, and we've seen space missions, we've seen a change, increase, of course, sometimes decrease. So I wanted to investigate how that has been changing per decade instead of year, right? So in that case, what I did was I actually created a custom colon, right? You could do this with DAX, but I did it here in order to optimize my work, right? So let me do it here, but it's still the same method, even if you want to do it with DAX, with calculated colon. So all I did was, first you need to understand what you want to do, and that's that. Okay, how do you check for a decade? So decade should be from 1957, for instance, should fall in 1950s decade. So it means 1957 is a year between 1950 and 1959, right? So for 1960 now, that's 1960s decade. So you need to know that boundary. That will help you in building it up. So all we're going to do with this year colon, I'm going to click on custom colon, right? So custom colon. You could use, I'm not sure if conditional colon will work, because we have two boundaries. We want to check between a particular year and another year, right? So the example I gave, we want to check between 1950 and 1959. So any year that falls within that range, that becomes 1950 decade, and so on, right? So I'm just going to call this decade, right? And then the formula works. Just very similar to DAX. So if year, right? So if year is greater than, right? Let's use this same example of 1957. So once we do that, we'll easily recreate for other years, right? So if year is greater than or equals to 1950, right? And so it means 1950 inclusive, right? And year again is less than 1960. Okay, so meaning 1960 is not inclusive. Then, so what is the output? What do you want to produce? So I want it to give us, you could give it anything, right? So I could put mine as 1950, 1950s, if you want, you could do something like this. Else, so let me just come here. Else, if, so that's not all, we want to check more conditions, right? So else if, and then this, you could just copy and paste this and just try to modify it. So else if year is greater than 1960 now, right? It's greater than or equals to 1960 and it is less than 1970, then it is 1960s, right? Else, let me bring this again. Else if, so you could do this until you get to the last year that you have. So let me just pause the video for a moment and just complete this. So here is the formula. So if you actually try to create that on your own, then you should have something like this. So we have the year less greater than or equals to 1950 or less than 1960, then it's 1950s, and so on. So if you check the last one, if a particular year is greater than or equals to 2020 and the year is less than 2030, then we are in the 2020s decade, right? Just like we have now. So once I click on OK, you'd realize that that will populate. So exactly, we can see 1957 falling in the 1950s category. So, and then if you just check through, load more, you realize that we have everything sorted out for the decades, right? So just for later, I know we would need it, so let me just do it now. Another thing is to get the decade year. It's still going to be basically the same formula. What I would just do this time is, let me just copy this formula. So, and then I'm going to create a custom colon again. So once I create it, I'm just going to paste the formula here. I'm going to name the formula decade year. Okay. So because we are going to need it later, so don't worry, you find out why we need it. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of this 1950s as a string, so I'll just take off the double quotes. So I just have 1950, right? So 1960 and then 1970. I'm just going to take off this, the S and the and you know, instead of it being a string, it's going to be like a number, right? So we're going to use it later. And so we have this, just nothing changed, just decade year. Take note of the difference. We have decade, which is like tells us as a string we are in the 1950s, and then we have decade year, which is just like the year you know, from that decade. So we have that created. So I think for now we probably got all that we need. I believe if there is any other thing that we need to create, then we would have to come back to create it. But for now, let's just go to close and apply, and then we head over to our Power BI view. Okay, so it's just loading and it's loaded. So here, if we come to our data, we'll see all the things that we have just worked on. Of course, these columns that we created can be done using DAX, calculated column, but in order to like optimize our model, I prefer to create it in Power Query. So I think that's all for this particular video. In the next video, we'll be looking at creating some DAX measures that will help us, and then we'll go over to the visualization. I hope to see you soon. Take care of yourself, and bye-bye.